Perhaps the most influential man in nutritional science and medicine was American scientist Ancel Keys. And he was, his hypothesis was that high cholesterol was the most important risk factor for development of heart disease. And he based it on something called the 7-country study, which showed a correlation in several countries between the consumption of saturated fat, cholesterol, and heart disease. But when you actually break down that data, you realize, one, it's actually not very strong, the correlation, to the point where it could well be completely false and unreliable. But despite that, despite the fact that there wasn't rigorous studies to really support his hypothesis, in the early 90s, there's an article which you can find published in the New York Times, where Keys actually says, "I've come to realize cholesterol is not as important as we used to think it was." Now that's a very big statement from the man that actually has been most influential in not just promoting or propagating a low saturated fat diet, and with it a very high refined carbohydrate diet that's gone with it, unfortunately, but also a multi-billion-dollar, in fact, this year it's estimated total revenues from sales of statin drugs is going to reach $1 trillion. So the fear of cholesterol and saturated fat, we should not be naive, is a multi-billion stroke trillion-dollar industry. And therefore winding back from those harms and reversing that information is going to take time. What's very interesting, in 2015, US dietary guidelines specifically exonerated dietary cholesterol as harmful to health. And what was, again, fascinating, because the research showed that cholesterol in the diet, for example, what you find in egg yolks, does not raise blood cholesterol. And despite that exoneration, because we're trying to wind back the harms from misinformation for several decades, this information has not got out as widespread as it should do to the general public. And the industry, and I see this myself when I walk around, on the high street, is people still will, buy, or eat egg whites, when in fact actually the egg yolks are one of the most nutritious part of the egg. So if there's one message from this interview people should get, is do not fear egg yolks. It's one of the most nutritious parts of eating egg, which is a very highly nutritious food which contains all the essential amino acids you need to eat as well.